All right, welcome to WSQ number 9. Today we're going to be talking about chemical compounds in cells and a couple objectives for us today to look at. First of all, we're going to discuss what are elements and compounds. What's the difference? We're going to talk about how water is important in the function of cells. And we're going to discuss what are the functions of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And so that's what we're going to look at today. Let's jump right in. First of all, we need to define what is meant by the term elements. Of course, if you think of the word in English, if something is elemental, means that it's basic. It's what makes something up. And when we talk about elements, what we're referring to is any substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances. Okay. In living things, the different elements include carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Now, if you look at the periodic table, those of you that are 8th graders remember this very fondly from last year, don't you? Yay, periodic table. For those of you that are 7th graders, you can look forward to this next year fondly. But we're talking about these elements of carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and sulfur right here, and phosphorus, and what am I missing? Hydrogen. Okay. These are some of the elements found in living things. Okay. All of these elements on the periodic table, all of these different things, all 118 of them plus, are elements that are found around us. Some of those things are things like gold is an element, silver, nickel, copper, cobalt, iron, potassium, neon, krypton, chlorine, lithium, beryllium. There's all kinds of different things that fit in this classification. But these are substances that cannot be broken down into simpler substances. If I take an atom of carbon and cut it in half, I don't have carbon anymore. I've lost its ability to be carbon. One atom of carbon is as small as it can get. So that's what an element is. And why that's important is when we talk about living things, we'll find out that that smallest element, and by the way, I just said that, but the smallest element is an atom. So one atom of a substance, one atom of carbon, or one atom of hydrogen, one atom of oxygen. That's as small as you can get. You can't have a half of atom. And we're not going to go into great detail about each of those. But those elements come together and they form what are called compounds. Okay? So what a compound is, when you take two or more elements and you combine them chemically, you get a compound. Okay? A molecule is the smallest unit of any compound. So you can have a water molecule, you can have a sugar molecule, but that's where you've taken multiple elements, combined them chemically, and you'll get a compound. So let me give you a couple examples. Here's one. This is a visual of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is made of carbon and oxygen. And so what happens is the carbon dioxide molecule has, as we can see here, one atom of carbon and two atoms of oxygen. Okay, so these combined make a carbon dioxide compound. Now understand this, it cannot be carbon dioxide without one carbon and two oxygens. You got to have that. That is the smallest compound of carbon dioxide you can have. Look at water. Water is a molecule. Water is made up of one atom of oxygen and two hydrogen. We call it H2O. We call it carbon dioxide. Right? You've seen both of these. Carbon dioxide described as CO2 and water described as H2O. What we're dealing with in those examples are molecules, okay, that are made of a compound, okay, elements put together. And I can't have water if I don't have one oxygen combined with two hydrogen. So those are both compounds. Now, why is water important? So one thing we want to talk about real quickly is what is the function of water or the importance of water? So as we said, water molecules are made from oxygen and hydrogen. Here's a few things about water. One, water makes up about 2/3 of the human body. So it's very important to us as human beings that we have a lot of water, as the case with many plants and animals as well. Most chemical reactions, number 2, would not take place without water. So without water, there's a lot of chemical reactions that would never even function or start. Classic example from plants is without water, plants don't do photosynthesis, and without photosynthesis, plants don't make energy for themselves. 3, water helps cells keep their size and shape. We talked about turgor pressure yesterday. In class, we've talked about it before. Turgor pressure, the ability of a plant to maintain its size, its shape. That's also the case with humans. A lot of guys, for example, bodybuilders will go without drinking water before competitions because what it does is it causes their body to shrink up, and that makes their muscles look larger. 4, water allows plants to convert energy into food. This is what we're talking about with photosynthesis. 5, water helps keep the temperature of cells stable. Water actually helps us regulate our temperature. It keeps us pretty neutral. If you've ever noticed, if you have a pool, pools, we can kind of demonstrate this. If you have a pool out in the middle of the summer, it may be 100 degrees outside, but the pool won't get to 100 degrees. Just as like in the winter, it may be 30 degrees outside, but the pool is not going to get down to 30 degrees. It helps in regulating and keeping temperature more stable. So those are the 5 important ways that water is helpful for us. Now, one last thing we can talk about is how important it is, the difference between what's called an inorganic compound and an organic compound. Okay, inorganic compound and an organic compound. Now, inorganic and a lot of us, we're used to the words organic because of organic foods. Inorganic just means that it does not contain carbon. Any substance that does not contain carbon is considered inorganic. Water, H2O, does it have any carbon? No, it's inorganic. Sodium chloride, NaCl, known as table salt, is that organic? No, because it does not contain carbon. So if it contains carbon, it is organic. If it does not contain carbon, it's inorganic. So those organic substances that contain carbon are things like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And we're going to talk about those 4 things pretty quickly today. So let's talk about each of those types of organic compounds. The first one are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are an energy-rich compound, meaning they give us lots of energy from them. 2 classic examples of carbohydrates are sugars and starches, right? That energy that they provide gives us energy to function, but it also allows us to make cell parts out of the carbohydrates, like cellulose and things in plants. We did say sugar and starches, so if you think of things that are sugars and starches, that would be, potatoes are a starch, breads. Think of sugars like fruits that have sugars, all kinds of substances that we know, foods, fruits, vegetables, things like that are high in sugar content. And so they're full of carbohydrates. Okay, most of the foods, pastas, breads, cereals, and things are carbohydrate rich. The interesting thing about carbohydrates too is that carbohydrates are also found in cell membranes, and so they have an important function to cells just at that level as well. Second type of organic compound we're talking about are lipids. Lipids are also made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, so same building blocks. The difference is lipids also have what's called a fatty acid. These provide much more energy than carbs or proteins. A carbohydrate and a protein, let me just write this for you. A carbohydrate actually gives 1 gram of carbohydrate, okay, will give you 4 calories. That's how much calories are in 1 gram of carbohydrate. 1 gram of fat will give you just over 9 calories. So it's over double the amount of storage. That's why a lot of times our body will store lipids, which is really a protection mechanism to help us to survive in times we don't have food and things like that. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we have plenty of fat, plenty of food, and so we end up eating more than we need. This also makes up most of the cell membrane portion of the cells, which is important. Thirdly are proteins. Proteins are made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur, so they have a couple more elements in them. And 1 gram of protein is also equal to 4 calories. So you notice each of these has calories, which means they're energy rich. These are made of small molecules that are called amino acids. And amino acids are really important because amino acids are basically the building blocks that make up the different proteins of the body. And there's basically a total of 20 common amino acids that we have. And what's interesting with the amino acids is they make up the cellular structures and different organelles that make up our body. Remember, we talked about ribosomes being so important. Well, that's because they make proteins, and proteins make up our structure, which is important. These also are helpful in chemical reactions that take place in different cells. And these are special proteins known as enzymes that will actually speed up reactions and change up reactions. For example, there's an enzyme in our mouth that's called amylase. It is a protein, it's an enzyme that helps us dissolve sugar, carbohydrates, and so it's really important. The fourth type of organic compound are nucleic acids, and these are a little bit unique. These are made of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Okay, these are not energy rich. They don't have calories. But nucleic acids, these contain the instructions that cells need to carry out all the life functions. So this would be our DNA. It's the genetic material that passes to offspring. So we have DNA, which actually literally stands for, let me show you. DNA actually stands for, where is it at? There we are. So if I spell it out, it's a big word. Deoxyribo, make sure I spell it correct because I'm a bad speller. Ribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid, that's deoxyribonucleic acid. That's DNA, that's the genetic materials. We also have RNA, which is ribonucleic acid. It's a Y on this one though. Ribonucleic acid. And this is actually used in the production of proteins. And we'll see this in protein synthesis. DNA we'll see in DNA transcription, RNA in protein synthesis. So nucleic acids are so vital because they actually contain the instructions for our cells to carry out the functions of life. And so that's an intro to these particular structures. We'll talk more about them as we progress. You've watched it. You should summarize and answer the questions on Haiku, and I will see you guys in class. Thanks.